Tony Montalto's 14-year-old daughter, Gina, was killed in the Parkland shooting back in 2018. He is also the president of the Stand With Parkland group, and he joins me now. I have to give my condolences right off the bat because I can't imagine how re-traumatizing it is every time you see this. I mean, what was your reaction when you saw what unfolded in Michigan?
Well, it's certainly saddening to see this another school shooting. We mourn for the victims. We pray for the quick recovery of the wounded, and sadly, we know the pain of the victims' families, the hole in your heart that forms, and the feel that you just can't breathe. So we're frustrated, that we haven't seen enough action to help prevent school shootings.
And let's talk about that in action, because you guys have been saying for years now that save the thoughts and prayers, okay? Let's try and get something done. And you draw a direct line from the 4 victims at that school dying to what has not been done, that they died because there has been inaction. Do you see a consensus going forward, some kind of bipartisan consensus? Where is the momentum for some of the proposals that your group has put forward?
Well, Stand With Parkland, the National Association of Families for Safe Schools, looks at school safety in a little bit more of a uniquely nonpartisan way. We're uniquely inclusive, and we look at school safety having a 3-prong approach: securing the campus, better mental health screening and support programs, and finally, if you choose to own one, responsible firearms ownership. We were just up in Washington, D.C. The week before Thanksgiving, advocating for some of the bills which we see that have bipartisan support. And among those are the Eagles Act, which is a bill that will increase funding and allow the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center to go out and do more training in the field for school districts that want it, to allow them to perform behavioral threat assessments properly. We also support a bill to get increase in mental health counselors in the schools. We know that children are under stress after COVID. The Secret Service studies show that most mass school attacks occur after a break in attendance. And as we know, many students saw a break in attendance with COVID. And they also, some of them weren't involved in the most loving and caring environment they could be. So we need everybody to come together and work on that in the school to get kids help before they resort to violence.
Since the tragedy in your own family at the school, what have you learned in terms of what do you think is going to get this country there to actually enact some of this incredibly reasonable and logical legislation that you just pointed to?
Well, we need to have the desire to work together. Too often, and I'll blame the media a little bit on this, too often the people on the far left get the attention and the people on the far right get the attention. And they're screaming at each other over those of us in the middle. So one thing that Stand With Parkland, the National Association of Families for Safe Schools, is in place for is to start to build the bridge, to start to be the voice of those of us in the middle, those of us who can see both sides of the argument, who can take the time to listen to one another and work together to find pragmatic solutions to either policy or law that will help keep our students and our staff safe in school. My beautiful daughter, Gina, was taken from me in what was probably the most preventable school shooting in American history. Over 40 visits by the police to the shooter's home. The school district was aware of the danger this shooter posed. The FBI had tips regarding him, and nobody could put the pieces together to stop this. And sadly, we see some parallels here with the recent shooting in Oxford Township. We see the school doing a good job of initially identifying the student, bringing in the parents, but what they failed to do is bring in their behavioral assessment team. Their behavioral threat assessment team would have consisted of school personnel, mental health professionals, and law enforcement. And the reason you want that multidisciplinary approach is because each of those folks bring something special to the table. Perhaps a mental health professional would have looked at some of those drawings and said, we need to get this child help immediately. Perhaps law enforcement at the school would have looked at some of these warning signs and said, you know what, we need to search your backpack before we send you back to class. But again, that's why these multidisciplinary teams are so important. And this is borne out in the research by the National Threat Assessment Center.
Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of thoughtful proposals there, and a lot of work, courageous work that I know you and everyone that is an advocate for school safety has put forward. Thank you so much for outlining some of it. And again, our condolences on what must be a very difficult time of the year for you and your family. Appreciate it.
We do miss our Gina every day. But thank you very much for having me on and for helping us spread the word on these proposals that can just bring people together once we decide to keep our children and students safe in school.